Aha! Success.
Yay.
We did it.
Yes. Well, first off, I love your setup.
Oh,
It's amazing.
usually I'm upstairs, but there's like no one in the house today. So
Perfect.
it's downstairs today.
There you go. Well, cool. I'm Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Nice to meet you.
Chelsea.
That's perfect. Well, cool. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. Shouldn't be longer than 30 minutes ish. So,
No problem.
yeah. So I guess a little bit about me. So I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. I work in video production. I work for professional sports, the NHL team here. I do video editing. I went to school.
Fun.
Yeah, it's
That's
great. I love it.
awesome.
It's amazing. Yes. So we moved here from Portland, Oregon, where I worked for 3 or 4 years. And then I went to film school in Savannah, Georgia, where I studied editing and all that good stuff. Originally from New York. So I've kind of been everywhere. Um, and yeah, so yeah, I loved film, and something that I'm really interested in is horror, and I've always been interested in horror, and got my Hereditary shirt on. Um,
Gem in the holograms.
amazing. That's great. I expected nothing less. So this is awesome. But yeah, yeah, I actually volunteered at the Overlook Festival and went in 2019. So I was familiar with your film and everything. Didn't get to see it then, unfortunately, but it was always on my list, and I got to see it. And yeah, it was just something that we've been doing kind of recently is, I've been interviewing, some people, filmmakers, and kind of I just want to get to know people, get to know them behind the films. And I love that kind of, behind the scenes type of thing. And what On Set is, it's an app for movie locations. So, you can see what was filmed near you, because that's something I'm huge into, is film tourism, going to locations and whatnot. So yeah, it's just, so we have a podcast where we review movies, and this is kind of our little side thing where I kind of do this. And yeah, just because my two co-hosts aren't really big into horror, so I can't talk much horror with them, unfortunately. So this is kind of my release I get to do. So
I love it.
I would love to just talk, about you as a filmmaker, kind of your backstory, mainly about Satanic Panic, or, what are other films you want to kind of mention. But I guess to start off, kind of where did you start? How did you kind of get started in filmmaking?
Yeah. So I'm the child of artists. And so I grew up in a very artistic household in the Midwest. And my parents love movies, and they started showing me movies at a very, very young age. My dad took me to see Back to the Future, and it came out the year I was born. So he took me as an infant, and I think that imprinted on me. I have a Back to the Future tattoo on my arm.
Amazing.
It's my favorite movie of all time. So yeah, I grew up in the art world and just always gravitated towards movies, and started asking my teachers in high school, hey, can I turn in a short film instead of writing this paper? And they said yes. And so I started, I grew up in a house that had, the VHS camcorders and high 8 camcorders. So my parents were always like filming stuff. And so I had them at my disposal, and just started making movies. And then I took a continuing education film class in high school, because I went to a public high school that didn't offer any sort of filmmaking courses. They do now, but at the time they did not. And so I started making movies on Super 8 film, and wanted to go to film school. Like, I knew I wanted to go to film school. I knew I wanted to be a director very early on, because I like being the boss. And went to Ohio University School of Film.
Okay.
So focusing on directing, and it's a small school. They only take like 2 to 3 undergrads a year. It's mostly a graduate program. So you go through a graduate program as an undergrad with an undergrad degree. So you could still go into grad school if you wanted. But
awesome.
If you go to film school as an undergrad, do not go to grad school, just start making movies. And then I had an internship out in Los Angeles, and I ended up doing that. And I went back to school and finished my thesis, and then started working in LA immediately after. But my origin story of wanting to make movies comes from my parents. I'm the product of artists, and therefore have also become an artist.
Wow, that's super fascinating. That's super cool. Were they into filmmaking as well, or was it a different type of art?
So my dad was into filmmaking. He is into
Okay.
filmmaking. He went to like part of his, because he went to school for art, painting, drawing, etc. But he also took film courses, and his film courses were actually with David Lynch. They went to the same
Amazing.
this is before David Lynch went to AFI. He went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. And so my dad was a peer of his. And
Wow.
so I've seen my dad's college films that he shot on 16 millimeter, which are really cool.
So cool.
Yeah. So my dad had filmmaking, so he knew how a movie was made and could explain that to me. And because he's such a cinephile, he was the one who was like building my cinema education. So
Okay.
he was like, here's all the movies you need to see. Here's like the foundation of filmmaking that you should have. And I had seen like the AFI top 100 list before I even went to college. So we were always and I worked at the library in my town. So I was always renting like movies every night, or on the weekend, I'd bring a stack of like 6 movies home. So we were very movie friendly. And I also didn't have cable. So it's like,
Right.
it was all about movies. And my parents had a huge movie collection. And so that was our form of entertainment, especially when you live in like a very rural part of the country.
Totally.
You get it where you can.
100%. I'm very similar. I grew up in a very small town, upstate New York, kind of near Buffalo, Rochester area, Niagara Falls, like super small town, one stoplight. And we, one movie store, whatever. And I was the same way. I didn't have cable, so all we did was watch movies. Now I guess, so what about your horror background? Is that kind of your main squeeze, or are you kind of into everything?
Yeah, I'm a cinephile in the true sense. I love everything. I watch everything. Horror specifically spoke to me. I want to say it traces back to 2 different things. It traces back to my parents love Halloween. So they always had massive Halloween parties every year with all their like artistic friends. So of course, everyone came in these amazing costumes.
So
And
cool.
yeah, I had a very beautiful, idyllic childhood.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And so they also like the mythology of Halloween. They wanted me to know. And because they're artists, they would carve these amazing pumpkins. And so I think it kind of like, because that started at such a young age, like October was a big deal in my family. And so, they would show me sort of the Halloween cartoons, everything from Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the Mickey Mouse ones, Skeleton Dance, all of that. So I think that definitely started that. And my mom is like OG witch. So I think like,
Amazing.
and they're very into nature too. So it's like they fully embraced Halloween and the mythology of Halloween. And I think so it was that, but also I read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Bunnicula, Goosebumps. Like I just loved those stories. And I loved Halloween. I loved fall. And I think that sort of, I guess cartoon form is where I first started really liking it. And it reminded me of like my favorite time of year. And I wasn't in an area where I could trick or treat. So the parties were everything.
Gotcha.
And I've written about this. That's been published in like books and stuff, like my Halloween love. But my dad showed me the universe. So when we prep for these parties, he would show me the Universal monster movies. So Dracula, and these are all on like VHS tapes. So Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman. Creature was a summer movie. We did not watch that one at Halloween. That was for like June, July.
Yes.
And so I would, I just loved those movies and I associate them with my favorite time of year. So, and Dracula is my favorite. I was just absolutely in love with that. And Bela Lugosi. And again, that's another one I've like talked about a bunch because I love it so much. And then he showed me Night of the Living Dead and the George Romero OG, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, I want to make movies like this. I just immediately connected to the horror genre. And then of course they would always show me stuff that they felt I was old enough to see, but I wasn't seeing like Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was like 10. I saw that a little bit later. In high school, I just started seeing everything. My best friend and I would just rent everything we could get our hands on in the horror world.
Awesome.
And I was just in love with it, but it originates from Halloween, from literature. and then the movies. And I just consumed as much of it as I could. But again, I love all movies. I love sports movies. That's actually one of my favorite subgenres.
Oh, cool.
So, you know, but again, I sort of fell into the horror world because a lot of the stories I wanted to tell were in that genre.
Sure. Well, that's super cool. That's so funny. Like, I feel like I relate to that so much because, you know, I love sports. Is like horror is one of my loves, and the sports is my secondary love. And it's super cool to hear that, because I feel like you never get that, especially in our field. It's like, oh, you work in film, you're probably not, you know, I would say for the most part, you're not gonna be into sports. Like when I went to film school, they were a lot of our professors, and it was very geared towards LA and New York City, and you know, you're gonna work on movies and stuff, which was super cool to me. But I kind of wanted to, you know, go to the sports world, and so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But it's super cool to have that, you know, the separation there. But I'm glad you brought up Goosebumps, because I have the little Goosebumps tattoo here.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
So I'm gonna get it, hopefully get more related to that. But Goosebumps is kind of what I got started as well, the show and the books, and it's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, I think I even have, I do, like, right, if I can even pull them out of my bookshelf. I have from childhood, my scariest stories to tell in the dark books. I like still with the original artwork.
Oh, that's so cool.
I still have them because I love them so much. And I still read them every Halloween.
That's great.
But yeah, anyways, I keep them in my giant vinyl and bookshelf. I have bookshelves all over this place.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Cool. Well, that's super fun. I love how people kind of get into horror and kind of get into the, you know, what their, you know, their passion, and, you know, that's super cool that you are on that path of doing what you really want to do. So I think that's awesome. So props to you for getting there.
It took a lot.
I can imagine. I mean, I know it's tough. So it's super cool that you can do that. And I guess it's a great transition now. Let's get into the movie, you know, your Satanic Panic. And I would love to kind of know the origins of that a little bit. And, you know, where did you come up with that idea? You know, what were your influences, and, you know, what other movies inspired you? And
yeah, so I'll backtrack a little bit, because what led me to being able to make a movie is important to note. So obviously, like I was saying, after college, I moved out here, but I fell into the comedy world, and I started working as an assistant to an executive at Montecito Picture Company, and that's Ivan Reitman's company, RIB. And so he was like so lovely, and that was a really incredible experience, but I'd never been an assistant before, and it was really intense. And Allie, like my boss, she was so wonderful and showed me the ropes and taught me how to be like a really good assistant. But because I was such a good assistant, I was an assistant to all sorts of people for about 10 years. So I worked at Montecito for 2 years. I worked for Judd Apatow at his company for 2 years. So again, comedy. And then I got a job working for Jason Blum at Blumhouse Productions for 4 years. And that was 2011 to 2015. And that's Insidious came out in April 2011. So no one knew, Blumhouse was not a household name then.
Right.
And I watched it grow into like the empire it is now.
Wow.
And it was a really incredible experience. That I look back very fondly on, and it was very much family oriented. Like when I started, it was 3 people. It was Jason, me, and his executive.
Whoa.
That was it. And when I left, it was like becoming its own studio. And Jason knew I wanted to direct the whole time I was there. He's like, do you want to be a producer? Do you want to be an executive? I was like, no, I want to direct. And he's like, all right, I respect that. And when I was like, I think it's time for me to move on, it was becoming more corporate. Things were getting much bigger. He was about to have kids. And I was like, okay, I think now's my time to like move on. And I was like, oh shit, I haven't directed anything since college. Like, who's going to take me seriously? And he's like, you should go direct for Crypt TV. So he reached out to Crypt. He's like, I have a new director for you to look at. And I started directing short films for them, and they were paying for me to direct them, which was amazing, because no one gives you money to make short films.
Right.
And so I made 7 short films. I think 4 or 5 of them were with Crypt, and then a couple were other just like independent ones I was doing. And during that time, I was still assisting people, but I was assisting directors. So I assisted a TV director, a commercial director, and then I assisted Adam Robitel on Insidious: The Last Key. So that was the 4th Insidious movie. And I basically shadowed him. and it was an incredible experience. And meanwhile, so like while I'm working for him, I'm sending scripts to my friend at Blumhouse, my friend Ryan Turek. And he came into the company right as I was leaving. Like Ryan and I have known each other forever. He's one of my best friends.
Awesome.
And I'm like, how about this one? Do you like this one? How about this one? And these are all scripts that I was attached to, that I didn't write, but I was attached to direct. And he's like, no, not this one, not this one. This isn't, because, you know, Blumhouse is very specific. And so finally, I think I met with him and we were just having coffee and I was like, oh yeah, I'm attached to this script. I haven't sent it to you yet. It's called All That We Destroy. And I kind of told him what it was about. And he's like, Chelsea, that's the movie I want to make. That's the movie we should make with you. So he brought it to Blumhouse and I got to make my first movie with my alma mater, which was really cool. And, you know, that was shot in January, February 2018.
Okay.
I make that movie in Los Angeles. And it's literally script to screen.
Awesome.
It was such a wonderful experience. The cast was incredible. I just got very lucky that my first experience was so lovely. And a science fiction thriller, you know, this is my nod to everything from Psycho to Black Mirror to We Need to Talk About Kevin. But meanwhile, so I'm in post-production on that movie. I get sent Satanic Panic for my consideration. And it's written by Grady Hendrix, who's an author I love. My Best Friend's Exorcism, Final Girl Support Group, Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Like, so I'm a big Grady fan and I see this script. I'd actually read the script the previous December. A friend had just sent it to me and was like, hey, I read this script. I know you love Grady. And I was like, this is amazing. It's so batshit crazy. And I can't wait to see it get made. Cut to like 7 months later, it comes across my desk. And I said, I already read this script. I have some notes. And so I gave the notes to the producers and Grady, they were down with all my notes and he did so basically it appeared to me. And, then we were shooting that in October 2018. So I'm still in post on All That We Destroy. I start prepping and shooting. Like I got the script in July. We started prepping August, September. I went out to Texas to shoot it, shot it. And then I was in post on both movies at once.
Oh, wow. Oh
and then they released the same month in terms of like All That We Destroy came out on Hulu Mother's Day weekend of May 2019 and Satanic Panic premiered at Overlook the end of May 2019.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then once All That We Destroy was out, then I started doing like Satanic Panic got into like 25, 30 film festivals. It was an embarrassment of riches. Champagne Problems. I'm so thankful it was so well received by all those festivals, but then it's doing press. I mean, it's never over. Like as the director, you're with the movie.
Right.
You're the writer, you're from conception, but then you're with it until it's on a shelf in a Walmart somewhere in middle America. So you are on that whole journey. So then it's the film festivals and then it's the VHS release and a Blu-ray release and a vinyl release. Like we got to do all that fun stuff. And then it came out on Shudder. And so, which is where you can find it now. You can also rent it on, everywhere, but I wasn't like done with that until like November because then we do the Blu-ray signing like here in Burbank. And so it wasn't until like November 2019 that I fully like put the movie to bed.
Whoa.
Then a pandemic hit. So, and now I'm like prepping my next movie, but it was like 2019 was like, and 2018 were incredible years, but they were really intense years. But to answer your question, long-winded way to get to it. So Satanic Panic, what I connected with is I was like, this is my chance to do, I call it a comedy horror movie because there's more comedy in it than horror. It's very quirky. It's very weird. It's left of center, which I love left of center stuff. And I was like, oh, great. This is my like moment to show my love for Drag Me to Hell. And like, Sam Raimi's working Evil Dead and Race with the Devil and House of the Devil. And, is really and like some of Peter Jackson's work. Like it was my chance to sort of pay homage to those films and those directors. And obviously like the opening shot is an homage to Halloween. And like, so you can kind of see all those references throughout. And also like I can claim that I discovered Hayley Griffith, who I just saw her audition tape. She's in New York City. I'm in LA. I just was going through audition tapes from other places that aren't here. And I fell in love with her. And I was like, she's Sam. This is her. And they, producers don't always let you cast who you want. And so they were like, yes, we agree. And, she was so wonderful, and Ruby Modine as well. And I knew Ruby from my Blumhouse days, and they just were such a perfect pair, and they became best friends, and they're very close now. And the whole cast was amazing. Like embarrassment of Richard. I think that the movie works because of the cast. Like they're delivering these insane lines, and having everyone from Rebecca Romijn to Jerry O'Connell playing a married couple in a film and they're a couple in real life. AJ Bowen and Jeff Daniel Phillips and Jordan Ladd. These are all like horror sort of royalty folks who came to be a part of this. The shoot was incredibly difficult. It was torrential downpour, horrible weather, like it was crazy. We'd have like 4 location moves in a day. It was like really pushed me to my limits in terms of like, it pretty much destroyed me as a human being, but I'm so proud of the film I made. And it's also like, I made it to inspire other like women to make movies. So young women to make movies. And I wanted it to be like when you put on at a sleepover and you watch together. And it's a very like kind of dark story, but Sam ultimately like triumphs and decides to go live her life. And but yeah, it's me being the vessel to bring Grady Hendrix's insanity to life.
Well, it worked very well. And I mean, I like Sam. To me, I think she's fantastic. Like I've been, looking at her IMDb, kind of waiting to see what she's into next over, since I watched this movie, because she was really good and the cast was fantastic. And it was such a great, I had no idea, like, I didn't really look into the movie before I saw it. I like to go into movies just completely blind, especially horror Shudder. Like Shudder horror movies, I'm going to just watch it because I would say 99% of the time I love them. But like, I'm seeing like Jerry O'Donnell in there was so random and I loved it. Like it was awesome. And Jeff Daniel Phillips, like he's such a great underrated actor. And yeah, it's such a great thing. But wow, that's so fascinating to hear. And I love that you mentioned comedy horror, because I try to explain this to people all the time. There's definitely a difference between comedy horror and horror comedy.
Yes.
And I feel like not a lot of people get that. And it's a genre for me that I feel like it's really hard to do, just because like I think Jordan Peele does a fantastic job of horror comedy, or comedy horror, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's a very hard genre to capture and do well. And I think, one of the reasons why I love this movie is because I think you did a fantastic job of doing that, because the funny parts are funny, but you can still have the horrific moments. And I also think that alluded to the great production design and the makeup, which was incredible too. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was so planned out. And I have to give credit, like the movie that was the biggest influence for this movie was Karn Kusama's Jennifer's Body, because that walks the perfect line of these great comedic laugh out loud moments, but also it has heart, and it's there's really scary moments in it. And so that I have to give that the most credit. And I even told, like, I had Ruby and Hayley watch that, and I was like, I want you to look at Needy and Jennifer's relationship, where it seems untraditional, but they do genuinely love each other and care for each other. And even though they have history with their characters, and Ruby and Hayley are meeting each other for the first time in the movie, I said that's something to really look at. But huge like inspiration. And yeah, Hayley, she has some stuff cooking. I know it's probably not on her IMDb because she's not allowed to talk about it, but I know there's some like big stuff coming. Cool. And I've just been very lucky with the actors I've worked with, because even in my first movie, Aurora, who was just my muse through that process, like she was so incredible, and to play, different versions. I mean, she's playing a clone, like 3 different clones or 5 different clones, plus an act like human. And, that was a challenging role, and she just crushed it. And Israel going from like the cute, quirky boyfriend on Happy Death Day and playing a serial killer. Wow. And Dora Madison, who's playing like cute girl next door, and then goes on to be in like Joe Begos's Bliss, which is like, she's so wild in that. So, and then working with people, someone like Samantha Mathis and Frank Whaley, who I've like loved my entire life.
Right.
I've just been very lucky. I play it real cool, but I love working with actors, and I get very excited about that because they're the ones who are like bringing what's on the page to life too. So, yeah, and we just got very lucky with how well received both movies were, and learned so much along the way. That's why I'm like so excited for the next thing that's happening. Yeah, and along the way, there's like always different things that inspire you. So I'm always consuming movies and TV, and I'm an avid reader, so I'm just always like consuming, because you'll see things seeping into the movies, and you're like, I wonder if that's a reference to, and I even like weird references, like Satanic Panic is my Wizard of Oz, which I've talked about this before, but like she wears red Converse, that's her ruby slippers. Because when I was reading the script, I talked to Grady and I was like, do you know this is Wizard of Oz? Basically, like she's going into a place she's never been before, that's sort of in a heightened reality. It's not of this world necessarily.
Right.
And then all she wants to do is go home. But she has a best friend who's her scarecrow. The rabbit becomes her Toto. Like I could see all these, there's the wicked witch, that she's fighting, and all her minions. Like, so I saw so many similarities, and I was like, I think, and she says so many times, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And I was like, Mill Basin is Oz, but a really fucked up Oz.
Right.
And, so that's why when I worked with Hayley, I was like, let's really lean into that. So she wears, her shirt is blue, like Dorothy's dress that she wears. The Converse are on purpose. Like all that's, I'm putting that in, peppering that in wherever I can.
I do love that. And I think I think I read a little bit on IMDb, the trivia, but sometimes it's hard to figure out what is real on the trivia. So it's always great to hear that from,
Yeah. A lot of that stuff is just like some random person putting it on there. Like when people read IMDb, like an ad stuff, like it's, who knows where that's coming from half the time.
Right. So that's super
that is
cool.
Correct.
That's awesome. I think that's so cool. And like, I think when movies can do that, it's really fun. And I think especially horror, I think that's one of the reasons why I love horror so much, is like you can incorporate so many, like I totally got that Halloween reference. I immediately thought that. And I know horror fans, like it's such a cool little, and I know, in the new Halloween and like, Ryan Turek on the movies he works on, like, I know he loves horror and it's cool to see what he does. And Jordan, it's all these, it's amazing. Like Ari Aster, it's cool to see their inspirations and everything. And now I have to ask, when in the very beginning, there was a little girl playing hopscotch. Was that a Nightmare on Elm Street reference?
It is.
Yes, good. I knew that.
A+, yes, it is.
Okay, cool. I was just curious, but I could tell the different, like, I could tell different inspirations and all that through. But the Wizard of Oz thing is really cool. I didn't actually get that. So it makes a lot of sense now that you mention it.
Yay.
But I guess going along with that, what other films, I guess in general, or maybe specific to this one or your previous films, what inspired you, or, from the filmmaking aspect, certain directors have styles, I'm thinking, modern day, I'm thinking Robert Eggers or Ari Aster, like they have such a specific style. Like, was there any filmmakers that made you, shoot a certain way or anything? Or was it kind of like, I want to make this my own thing?
Yeah, I think inspiration and imitation are two very different things. I never want to be, it's always inspiration is where you want it to come from. Cause it's like, how do I put my own spin on that instead of imitating someone else's work? What's my own spin on it? Hence why everything's just like, it will remind you of something, but it's not done exactly like how that was shot. But in terms of, the filmmakers that I am inspired by, so to answer this question, sort of like twofold. One of my biggest inspirations is Catherine Bigelow, because she does movies like Loveless and Near Dark, but then we'll go and do something like Point Break, which, that is one of my favorite action movies ever. And it's also like a sports movie too, in a way. So, like Her Trajectory, something like that. And then she goes into, she does Hurt Locker, and then she does Zero Dark 30, and then she's doing Detroit. Like her body of work is like incredible to me. And, she's also, I think, seen as a director instead of a woman director. And that's something like we all want to be seen as directors and not just hired because of our gender, which I think Hollywood is still like wrapping its head around.
Yes.
And yes, I will like use that to my advantage as much as I can, because they do need to keep hiring women, but the playing field is just not even yet. And I don't know if it will ever be, but she's just something where her work has just always inspired me. Another filmmaker is that comes to mind is Jonathan Demi.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you look at his work, everything is so different that he does. So, you know, you look at something like Silence of the Lambs and then Married to the Mob and then Something Wild. Like all those movies are vastly different. And that's something that I am really into, almost like being a chameleon, to be like, oh, that's because, again, my first movie is a science fiction thriller. This is a comedy horror. I'm also attached to a teen thriller, a dark comedy, like a dark coming of age comedy, a sports movie. Like I'm attached to other things that are outside the genre or genre adjacent, but I always want to keep people guessing as to what I'm doing next. And something with like, you know, even with my name, like with Chelsea's Stardust, I like David Bowie is someone who was never afraid of change. He was always transforming. He was always doing something different, but you still like knew it was David Bowie, but it made you take pause and be like, oh, what's he doing there? Like that's something I lean into, that I want to achieve eventually. And in terms of like inspirations within my first two films, the biggest ones, I wrote a piece for Talk House about this, and it's actually the four Johns is what I refer to it as, and it's John Hughes, John Cameron Mitchell, John Carpenter, and John Waters.
Awesome.
So those four directors and their bodies of work, and I know that's all it's all men.
Sure.
But the other thing is you know, they're filmmakers I grew up with, and also like there's threads of each of there's something from each of them that I've taken and infused in my own work. And so and that's something I've talked about like extensively, and also like with John Cameron Mitchell and John Waters, like really like aspects of queer cinema I love so much and try to infuse into my films as well. So but those are, you know, just examples of I'm getting inspiration all the time, but those are who like I've specifically cited when talking about my first two movies. And also my friends inspire me. Like I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by incredible filmmakers and peers that, you know, we're showing each other cuts of movies and scripts and giving each other notes, and just we want each other to succeed and do everything we can to lift each other up and help each other. And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think that's such a great thing to have. And, you know, I mean, I love that you said, you know, trying to be different and the variety of films and genres and all that. I think that's super important in filmmaking. I think that's something that sticks out to me, you know, when I study like a filmmaker or a certain director or writer, it's like, oh, like this person can do this really well, but they can also do this and this and this. And it's incredible to me that they can actually do that. You know, I mean, John Hughes is a great example of that. And I think of recently I was watching The Love Witch, you know, and it's that movie to me, I try to tell everybody to watch that movie just because it's aesthetically so great. It's insane that it was made, you know, recently in modern day, but it looks like it was in the 60s. Like, I think that's so cool. And another reason why horror is so great is because, and Shudder especially, because like, you know, they're like, hey, this new filmmaker here or whatever, you know, they're very, I feel like, I mean, I don't know them personally, obviously, but they seem very open to letting people kind of submit films and, you know, hopefully grow their, you know, filmmaking resume. So I'm just hopeful for the horror community, especially, but I think, yeah.
And I've been very lucky because I'm part of this, there's a group of, female directors that I'm like very close with, that we meet, you know, once a month, and we have a sort of a text chain when we need to vent about something or celebrate something. But, and it's interesting because there's the group of women that direct horror. It's not a huge group. Nope. And we all kind of know each other. And so it's so funny. A lot of us will get sent the same script, the same material. And so we'll meet with each other. Did you get sent this? what did you think about that? I don't know if it's for me, but you know, it's who it's great for. It's for this person. Or I'll get sent a script and I'll be like, well, this is a nunsploitation movie, not for me, but you know who it is for? Rebecca McKendry. I'm going to send it to Becca. Or I get this like this creepy period ghost story, not for me. Going to send it to my friend Axel Carolyn, or you know, so like, or see something and read something and I'm like, this is great for Natasha Kermani or Bria Grant or Maggie Levin or Roxanne Benjamin or Alice Waddington, like and Molly Elfman like has her, you know, feature debut, you know, so, and we're all friends with each other and we can talk each other through anything we need in like times of crisis or times of celebration. And I'm just so thankful to have that group of women and that we're all in each other's corner, because I think when I started out in this industry, they wanted to put women against each other. And because I think they got wise to like, oh no, what happens if they band together? Which is what's happening now is like, you know, instead of seeing each other as competition, now we're like, let's work together and help each other and advance each other's careers, because if we don't look out for each other, no one else is going to. So, and that's been like one of the best like things in my life, to have that support system.
I love that. It's so funny that, I mean, I love that we're kind of talking about this, because I was kind of compiling a list of some of my favorite films that I've seen recently, you know, via Shudder or whatever. And it's so great because like I'll be watching a movie and like usually I'll try not to look at anything. I'll just click play just because like I love being surprised, you know, as I mentioned. I would say most of them, you know, I would say, oh, you know, another woman. Like I think that's awesome. Like The Ranger, Tigers Not Afraid, The Power, Slumber Party Massacre, like all these movies. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know that was directed by a woman, and it's fantastic. And then I'll go into their IMDb and look what I've, you know, watch all the filmography, and I feel like that needs to be a little more pushed, just because there's so many great films out there, and it's like, I mean, you have The Revenge, Head Count, 34 Miles from Nowhere. Like, there's so many great movies out there that people need to see, and I think that's another great thing about these festivals too. And you know, I think it's Salem. There's a horror women's horror festival. Right.
There's several. There's like Etheria here in LA. There's Idaho Horror Film Festival, which is run by women. Salem, there's a slew of them. They're just starting to put like Axeman Film Festival. They're just starting to pop up. And I love that.
That's great. Yeah. Well, that's super cool. Yes. Have you been to Salem?
You know what? I have when I was younger, but I'm actually going there for my honeymoon this year.
Amazing.
Because I haven't been in a really long time, and I really want to go, and I may never come back. So we'll see.
Yes, we went. What was it? 2 years ago, for a weekend. It was like right before Halloween, which was really cool, but really busy at the same time. I got a little broomstick tattoo. Had to do it, but
I love it.
It was so cool. Then, you know, go to the Hocus Pocus locations, do some, you know, cemetery tour. It's amazing. But that's a place I would love to go see. I mean, I've been, but it was raining the whole time. So like we didn't get to experience as much as we wanted to. So we'll definitely have to go back. But that's exciting that you're going to be there. Now let's see, you are a director. Do you have any interest in, you know, writing or producing or editing or any of that? Or are you kind of just solely focusing on directing?
That's a great question. So when I was in college, I was directing and editing all my stuff. So I was like the editor for all my work on the Avid system. So I learned that. But I know there's a lot of directors who want to edit their own stuff. I find that I need an editor because there will be things that don't need to be in the movie that I'll like want in the movie, and they're not really pushing the movie forward. I just think it's always good to have an editor because for me personally, they're the ones who can really bring your movie together and see things you won't be able to see because you're too close to it. And so I'm all about hiring people to help me do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I've produced in the past, and I think because of my assistant background, and I'm so fucking type A that I'm really good at producing. And I also, right. And I also want to get my friends jobs. So I would probably be a great manager in another world. But writing is something I have done. It was a couple of years, the same year I was making 2 movies. Michael Kennedy and I actually wrote a pilot together we like pitched, and Michael Kennedy wrote Freaky, and with Chris Landon, and has Time Cut coming out. But we had an idea. It's so funny because we had an idea of, it was a comedy, like half-hour comedy of what happens when, what happens to a final girl after they survive.
That's fun.
Horror movie, but it was done in sort of a more comedic way. And like, okay, what, or I think it was an hour long. I said half hour, but what's her life after that? But not like immediately after, like years after. And so we were exploring that. We ended up, we sold the pitch to a studio. We got a network, hired us immediately to write the pilot. It didn't go forward because so many things don't. And what's so funny is this was like 2018 when we wrote it, sold it, like everything. And then Grady's Final Girl Support Group came out. And obviously that's serious. That's not does not have comedy in it very much, but that's getting made into a TV show. And so it's like, it was and people have been trying to do the Final Girl, like that story for a long time.
Okay.
But Michael and I just had like a very different take on it. And, didn't go, but that was a great, we co-wrote it, and that was a great exercise for me because I hadn't written anything in a really long time.
Gotcha.
I think about it a lot. I just have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to things I'm attached to. I have friends that are amazing writers, and I'll read a script and be like, can I attach myself to this? So I just got or I'll get something submitted to me that I fall in love with. And so I just haven't had the opportunity to write something because I'm attached to so many amazing things. Now I'll help develop stuff. Like I'll be meeting with the writer side by side. I give notes. I get asked to give notes on stuff all the time of other people's work. But so I just get very lucky because I'm attached to so many things. Like I don't have time to write anything. But I may come back to that eventually because I just love working and collaborating with other people. So I'll be like, oh, I could write this. Oh, who'd be great to write this is like, Michael Varrati or Michael Kennedy or whomever it is, Zoe Cooper. Like, so I end up farming it out to someone else because I love their work so much and want to work with them more. And it gives me a chance to. So I do see more writing in my future. I don't know when.
Gotcha. Well, that's cool that you're open to it. That's good. Yeah. I feel like, because then, you can, I love the mug. I didn't notice that before.
From the Stanley Hotel. Everyone should go visit.
That's the top of my list. I've never been, but it's up there.
You gotta go.
So cool. Well, that's super exciting. I mean, I don't want to take up too much more of your time because it's been a bit, but so going back to, you shot it in Dallas, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
that's
cool.
Satanic Panic, yeah.
How did that come
Hollywood
about?
Destroy was here.
Oh, okay.
On the production company behind it, they were located there. And so, because it was a really low budget, it wasn't like it was for tax incentives or anything, like it legit, that's where they were located. And they're like, we have a crew here and all this stuff. So I got to bring one person with me, which was my cinematographer. But the crew worked really hard on that movie. It was like very, again, it was a really intense shoot, but the only reason, that I shot there was because I was like told I had to.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I get why you
don't always get to pick.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially with the studios.
Yeah. And the weather was so insane too.
Was it? I mean, at least you guys were.
You get spoiled. I mean, you get spoiled in LA. There's a reason Hollywood is like the movie making hub, is because the weather here is great 99% of the time. It rains that 1% of the time. The weather here is always amazing. When you go elsewhere, it's out of your control. So it was out of my control. And I was like, hey, does it get cold here or rain? No. Yeah, it torrential rain, cold, like, and I was like, this is a nightmare. But you can't control it. It's so you got to work with it.
Right.
So you just like move forward. But again, I got spoiled when my first movie, like all the weather was great.
Of course. Yeah. Well, at least you're over that.
You know what? Yeah, it prepared me for the future. I mean, I have something I'm attached to that takes place in the snow. So, it's like preparing you for that.
So awesome.
Rain is hard. Then you get in the snow and it's a whole other thing.
Oh, it's a whole other wind, snow, everything. You never know what to expect. It's crazy.
Totally.
That's super cool. Now, do you ever like go to film locations? Have you ever been to like the Myers house or anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
So again, living in Los Angeles, because so many movies were shot here, and in, Southern California in general, I've been to the Myers house many a times. I'd love to have an office there. That would be amazing. So I've been there. I've been to a lot of the locations from Halloween, just in general. I just went to the Poltergeist house, which is in Simi Valley. I've been to Doc Brown's house, which is in Pasadena. Like, yeah, so there's locations everywhere. It's pretty crazy, especially if you're in LA or in, like, I went to some of the locations from The Fog when I was traveling like up the coast. Yeah. So it's so cool when you, like, I've lived in LA like 15 years at this point, and when you watch movies that are truly set in LA and are like embracing that, and they're not like, because so many times they're faking, you know, for example, the new Texas Chainsaw, not shot in Texas, that was shot in like Bulgaria or something, or Serbia or someplace like that. Romania, not shot in Texas. So a lot of times places are faking that. Like I saw something where they were like, it's Cleveland. And I'm like, this is not Cleveland. Cleveland does not have like A, B, C, and D, whatever it was. I think there was a subway system. I'm like, Cleveland does not have an underground, like, or something like that, where I was like, wait a minute. But when things are truly embracing LA, it's incredible. Cause you're like, I've been there. Like, so that's really fun. Or, you know, you go to where Nakatomi Plaza is and Die Hard. They're everywhere, like literally everywhere in LA, you know, you see, like, and when people come to visit, I'm like, okay, what location, what do you want to see? Like, let's go. But we live in it. So we, you know, sometimes we probably take it for granted that like we're in the middle of like, where's so much movie magic.
Totally. And you work in it, especially. So it's, it's a lot. I've been to LA.
Yes, I go.
Exactly. That's awesome. No, I've been a handful of times to LA. I love it there just to visit, and, you know, locations especially. And it's like, I went to the 2018 Halloween convention in Pasadena. So there was like a location tour, which was awesome. We just went to all the locations, and, you know, it was just great because you were just with a bunch of fans that were just strictly Halloween fans. I feel like you never get that anywhere. So it's super cool to be around that. Now, have you had any like part of the Halloween movies at all, or no? Like the newer ones? Like, I know you're friends with Ryan.
Like them, so. Or
just like anything. Like, have you been affiliated with any of the production at any point?
So that was after my time at Blumhouse. So basically, like when I left, it was right when Get Out was going to the Oscars.
Gotcha.
So if you look, like, if anyone's super curious, if you look on my IMDb, it lists all the movies I worked on. It's a lot. So it's a ton of movies. But my only like connection with Halloween is obviously Ryan. And though he's very tight-lipped, he does not give any spoilers. And then I have a friend who has done some special effects stuff on it.
Cool. Awesome.
So, but no, would love to, honestly, if there was a chance for me to go to set or visit it, I'm sure I would have been able to, but I didn't shoot anywhere near Los Angeles. But no, didn't get to be a part of those, but they are awesome. The weird, I guess the other connection I have to Halloween Kills in particular, my partner has sorry, I have a Scream cereal box that just like screamed at me. Sorry.
Amazing.
My friend in the UK sent it to me. My partner has a song in Halloween Kills. So
so cool.
Yeah. So Sean Keller is his name, and he makes these how do I describe them? They are novelty albums. Killer Sounds of Halloween, Revenge of the Killer Sounds of Halloween, and Killer Sounds Halloween 3D. So there's 3 volumes, and they're all original songs, but they're homages to Someone's Watching Me, to Monster Mash, but they're all done by, like, Sean sings some of them, but they're also like, there's tracks by Graham Skipper and Amanda Wyss, and there's like tons of like horror people involved in it that are singing tracks or spoken word, so when you look at the list of all the people who have performed on those albums, you're like, oh my God, that's so-and-so from this movie.
Sure.
Or this writer, or it's like the writer of the new Sonic 2 coming out, like Josh Miller, he has a track on the albums. So one of the songs on the album is in Halloween Kills. So that's sort of a fun crossover, but I highly recommend those albums. You can find them on Bandcamp. That's my like one thing I'll plug.
Perfect. Love that.
You love Halloween music, and it's very like, you know, all different. It's like a mixtape. It's a mixtape of Halloween music. I'll email it to you so you can.
That would be great. I would love that. I think
you'll love it, and you'll be like, this sounds like it's an homage to Kiss. It is. So if you think that, it is.
Amazing. That's the type of stuff I'm looking for. So yeah, that's great. I've been like, I'm always on the search for that. So that's super cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, cool. Well, sweet. Well, cool. I mean, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know it's been a bit. So yeah, I just want to thank you again, and I really appreciate everything, and can't wait to see what you do in the future. I'll be watching you guys and everything. So I'll be keeping tabs on it, watching your movies, sharing your movies. So, and maybe if you're ever a convention or anything, I'll run into you at some point. So
we'll see. The best place to keep up on everything I'm doing is Instagram. So at Chelsea Stardust. I have Facebook, but I never check it, and I'll probably deactivate it. And I'm not on the garbage pile that is Twitter. So Instagram's where to find me. Perfect. Well, we'll definitely be following you and sharing your posts. So thank you. Of course. Well, thanks again. And that's pretty much it for me. Well, thank you so much for having me.